my time. Okay, so couple funny things, right? As we're all learning this technology together, right? Super funny how here I recorded this hour and 22-minute video, and I was gonna plunk it in like I did last week and realized that it was slightly too large. So then I had to put it on YouTube and give you the link to YouTube. And by the time I got like all that technology taken care of, which was kind of funny because I'm not that tech savvy, someone was like, hey, it would be really helpful if you put the PowerPoint up. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? I was talking to that PowerPoint for an hour and 22 minutes and then realized I didn't share the PowerPoint with you all, share my screen. So then I started looking at the gestures that I had the entire time, and I hope you all got a kick out of that, because the whole time I thought you were looking at the PowerPoint, but you were square looking at me. So that is kind of funny. I'm going to try really hard not to let that ever happen again, especially because I think that the frame that it froze on when I first started was like straight up my nose. So that was
But after a while, though, I stopped looking up your nose because I was listening to what you were saying. So it was really interesting. I forgot all about your nose.
I so appreciate that, and I'm gonna be able to sleep at night knowing that you said that. Thank you. I am gonna try to do better and actually share my screen from now on, so you have that PowerPoint to stare at and not me. But anyway, okay, so we are back for another edition. Hooray! Tonight we're going to start off. I want to start off with sort of going back to last week, because I made it a point. I don't know if any of you got in the course room today, but I really made it a point that I wanted to have all of your papers graded before class tonight. So if you haven't looked, they are all graded. Or if you haven't submitted it, then that doesn't apply to you. But if you submitted your paper on time or relatively there close to that, all of your papers have been graded. And so I wanted to kind of just like give you some reflection on that. Because again, I don't know if I mentioned this before, I hate assessments. I really do. You know I don't like quizzes, but I really hate assessments because I really want them to be part of your learning process. I don't want it to just be like, oop, did assignment 1, checked it off, I'm good. I want you to learn from them. And so I try to give really good feedback, so at least you got, you know that I'm reading it, you know that I'm commenting on that. So I want to touch down on that just a little bit to give you some overarching feedback. And here's what I know about feedback, which is really interesting. Whenever we have a group conversation about how people did on papers, inevitably type A personalities immediately says, oh, she's talking to me. She was talking to me. I did that wrong. Did I do that wrong? And they start like getting all worried about that. So let me just say this from the beginning. Everybody did really well. And this is just to be constructive and helpful. So if it doesn't apply, as I tell my daughter all the time, if the shoe doesn't fit, don't wear it, okay? But if it does fit, then take it as constructive criticism. All right. So I'm gonna share my screen. Wouldn't that be a novel thing to do? I know. Here we go. And hopefully it's gonna work. Sharing my screen. Can you all see that? Yep. Can you see the pretty PowerPoint that's green?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Woohoo! Okay, here we go. So we're going to start off with some APA reminders, because I know you all love APA. And this is your favorite thing to talk about, because I've been a student and I know. Okay, so I'm moving your pictures over so you can see, kind of in the way. I made you this little chart to help you understand a couple things about APA. You don't have to put your pictures down because you're in my way. There you go. All right. So here's just some basic APA. I am not super picky about a lot of different things, but what I do want you to have is just the basic grasp here. So one thing is that I always you need a title page. Hands down, always, first page is always the title page. So don't skip over the title page, make sure you have a title page, okay? All right. Number 2, here's the, like my never, always, and why. Here it is. Never. Saying in this is what you say in the article. I hate APA. MACU students say, right? The article is I hate APA. That's the title. MACU students say you don't want to ever reference. I mean, you want to reference the article, but you don't ever want to put in the article or in the book or in chapter 3. You always want to just say the author's name, the year of publication, states that, or proposes that, or posits that, right? Do you see the difference in the article and then the name of the article? You don't want to put that, okay? You always want to just put the author's last name, then the year of publication, and then what you're trying to say, okay? Does that make sense? I can't see you because I made your pictures go away. Does that make sense? Are you with me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I put your pictures back. Okay, so now the next one here is I hate APA, the author Smith, period, and then the year of publication. Anybody would know why that's wrong?
Because it's a period, no comma.
Yeah, right. So if you were going to say this, right, you would want to take right here that it's always the author's last name, comma, the year of publication, and then the period goes at the end of the in-text citation, right? Because if you don't do that, then what ends up happening is that you have this random in-text citation that I don't know if it goes with the sentence before or the sentence afterwards. You want to make sure that your punctuation comes after the in-text citation, right? So the best way to do that would be to say, students love writing research articles. And you know who said that? I did. Maxfield, 2018, right here. Can you believe that? I know that's true for all of you, right? You love writing.
Definitely.
Yeah, right? But that's how you would say it if it was published, okay? You wouldn't want to say, I hate writing research papers, Maxfield, and then put a period. That wouldn't make any sense. Okay?
Also, Smith isn't capitalized.
Yes, that's wrong too. See, I layered the wrongness for you here.
Yeah.
Isn't that good? Yeah, the other thing about this is that, and this is a tricky one, okay? So I'm going to look at your faces because I know you're not going to like it. Okay, you ready? Here's the thing. Don't use first person. Okay. Now, I was really lax on this because this paper that you just wrote for last week was all about your own personal assessment of your skill set. So I was like, I don't really care, right? But from here on out, there should be nothing that has first person. You don't say I, okay? It's just not academically correct. You just don't want to do that, right? You rarely see that in any research articles. You always want to write in third person, okay? That makes sense?
Yeah.
I is that. Don't do it. Okay. All right, here's the next one, okay? Here's what you don't want to do. In the reading on page 5, blah, 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 right? Again, you're referring to the reading. You don't want to do that. Just give the author's last name, the year of publication, and then say, Corey, 2018, posits that, and then say what you're going to say, right? See the difference there in the reading on page 5? There's so much wrong with this. Not only are you referring to the actual reading when you should just do the author's last name and year of publication, but also, this one I should have put on here too, is all numbers under 10 get spelled out. All numbers under 10 get spelled out. And that includes percentages. Okay? All right. How about the next one? I think Freud was off his rocker. Yeah? Okay, you might agree with that. But what you should say is some clinicians take issue with Freud's psychosexual stages or whatever the issue is, and then put the in-text citation, okay? And this is, I know, hard to sort of swallow, but as graduate level students, here's the down and dirty. Are you ready for it? No one cares what you think.
I knew it.
I know, isn't that sad? No one cares what you think, right? But here's the great thing.
Right.
When you graduate and then you get your license, you do your candidacy, you get your license, and then you go do your PhD, and then you start doing research and you develop your own theoretical model, people start caring what you think. And then if you would like to tell everyone what you think, you may do so, okay? But until that, no one cares. So what they really want to see is that you can synthesize the material that you just read in a scholarly way, okay? So never, no one cares what you think. I know that sounds horrible, doesn't it? Especially for counselors, where we're all about caring about what other people think. But when you're writing for school, we don't, okay? Is anybody offended?
Nah.
Okay, good. I'm so glad, because I don't want to offend anyone. Just don't do it. Okay, here's the next one. Anybody see what's wrong with the book reference here? Well, see, look at the Y column.
Capitalized and you
Only
say
the first, yeah.
Only the first.
help is not.
I want you all to know here. Okay, look, I gotta look at your faces again. Here's what I need you to know. I actually say this phrase in my sleep at this point. My husband has to wake me up and say, I didn't capitalize the second word, because I write it so many times a day. Okay? So you all are gonna change the tide for me on that. All right? Don't capitalize anything other than the first word or after what?
Colon.
A colon.
That's right. If there's a colon, then you start over and the first word gets capitalized and nothing else.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
What about if it's somebody's actual name, or if it's a city or a state or a country?
You can capitalize proper nouns.
Okay.
Okay.
That's what I do. I just now was second guessing myself. Okay.
Thing is, though, is when you say like cognitive behavioral therapy, we might think of it as a proper name. It isn't. They're just cognitive. Okay. All right. But yes, you can capitalize people's names, cities, states. Okay. Good question. All right. So, and then the last one I already told you. In research studies, 5 students stated that they hated APA. We all know that that would be over 10, so that was a bad example. But if it was only 5, you have to write out numbers under 10. Okay? Did I confuse you on that one? Numbers under 10 always get spelled out. Look, if you all can make sure that you have a title page and then just do this chart, I'll be happy. How about that? We'll agree that's enough. Okay?
Dr. Maxfield,
Yes.
on this, and I'm gonna say it wrong, rubric, do we have to have a title page for the rubric?
Are you talking about the template for the week 2 assignment?
All the way to week?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. All assignments. Slap that title page on there.
Okay.
Okay? Even though you're using the template. Let's do it. It's good practice. Any questions about any of that?
I don't know how I'm gonna make a title page for it.
I have to say that I was thoroughly impressed with how much integration all of you did on your papers. It was great. Okay? All right, so that's enough about APA because no one really wants to talk about it anyway. All right. Now let's talk about some reflections on the week 1 paper. I can't move you all over. There we go. Oh no, it didn't work. Okay, so just some reflections on the paper. Overall, like I said, fantastic, some minor APA issues, but here's what, also watch that first person. I didn't take off any points if you use first person because it was a personal reflection, so that's fine, but I didn't want to not mention it and then have you do it next week and then be like, well, why did you take off points this week if you didn't do it last week, okay? So I want to just make that clear, is that this week, when you're filling out that template and you're thinking, oh, well, I'm going to explain why this client is doing what they're doing, and you say, well, I think that they have, you know, self-esteem issues, I'm going to cite you on that. And I'm going to say, again, I don't care what you think. I mean, on a personal level, I do, but not for class, I don't. And I don't want you to say I, don't use first person, okay? And I just really want to make sure that you know, don't use I, okay? You're all with me? I've hit you over the head with it enough, yeah? Okay, good. All right, let's talk about content. Here's some really interesting things that came up as I was reading through all these papers, and I wanted to just have a little bit of a conversation because I do want to get back to the psychoanalytic stuff that we're talking about. But here's what I've got, okay? Christian values. Many of you mentioned in your papers that your Christian values were both an asset and a liability in working with counselors. And so I found that that was really interesting just to kind of consider that, because it sort of brought up the question of what's the difference between a Christian counselor and a counselor who's a Christian? Anyone want to jump in? What do you think?
I think I can.
Go ahead, Kevin.
A Christian counselor might be more objective to what somebody wants to say, or maybe subjective. I don't know which one I'm using. A counselor who is a Christian, I put it here, he or she would be more like a chaplain. They're more open-minded. And I don't think if there was a problem that came up, they would be more adaptable. They'd be able to deal with it a little bit better. I think the Christian counselor would be more strenuous. He's more religiously orientated to whatever the Bible says. That's what it is. So that's just.
Yeah, I think that's a great definition, Kevin. Anybody have anything they want to add to that?
I do. For me, a Christian counselor says to their client, that behavior is unbiblical, you shouldn't do that. And a counselor who happens to be a Christian may think that, but is not going to say that, because that's not, you know, that just because it's wrong for our faith, it doesn't mean it's wrong for their faith or their values.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Everybody agree? Anybody disagree with that?
I guess a Christian counselor might work in a Christian organization as well. And being a counselor and being a Christian, you probably could just work anywhere and hold the values of a Christian. Mm-hmm. But like Deborah said, I think that even through the reading that we have to keep our values to ourselves. We are treating a client with their values. We're not treating ourselves with our values.
Yeah.
So that's what referrals are for.
Well, I actually went to a Christian counselor when I first started having some of my problems, and one thing I realized was they were more focused on my spiritual health and well-being versus my mental health and well-being, which I think the two go hand in hand. But there wasn't so much of from a behavioral standpoint or a psychoanalytic standpoint, it was spiritual and biblical.
Yeah.
I would agree with Abby.
Yeah.
I went to Catholic schools when I was growing up, and everything was more spiritually based on your behavior anyway. You know, Christians don't act like that.
Right.
Together, I was Sister Pat.
Mm-hmm.
That and Jesus, which I love Jesus, I'm a Christian, but it was more of a disregard of an actual mental disease versus that it could all be healed right here if I would just give it to God.
Yeah.
Which I had for 3 years, and he did heal me essentially, but it didn't just happen with some prayer. It took a lot of effort, and so that's just my experience with it.
Mm-hmm.
May I say something about that right quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
I noticed when I was going through AA that a sponsor made a real good point about something one time, and I don't know if people are old enough to remember on liquor stores they used to have a sign that said spirits on it. Yes. And in AA, you learn the concept of spirituality. And in all actuality, after almost 12 years of pastoring, I became closer to God because I learned what my relationship with Him was all about. And it takes a spiritual identity, which is the Holy Spirit, to overcome this evil part of the spirit of drinking, of alcoholism. So that I know what Addie's talking about when a counselor comes to there, because I think they're coming from that approach. It says it takes a spirit to get rid of one.
And I agree 100%. And it's a very fine line that I walk, because I think it's complex, but I think God is bigger than all of it. So it just becomes very, serious in my mind. I'm just like, as a counselor, and all these theories that I love and the science of psychology I love, but as a Christian, I feel pulled. You know what I'm saying? It's like, if we believe God can heal everything, why do we also need all of this? Does that make sense? I struggle with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anybody else ever feel that way?
Well, I think that everyone has a calling, and if the calling is to help someone in the psychological realm, it works hand in hand. God works with us to do things.
Yeah.
Amen. That's it.
Yeah, certain skills, if you will, to help someone else, and that is probably why we're sitting in this classroom right now, because we felt the calling to do this.
That's the perfect way to put it.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Go ahead, Deborah.
For me, this really gets under my skin. If you had a blocked artery, you wouldn't say, why isn't God healing me? You would go to the doctor. God would maybe help you and direct you to realize there's a problem and not to ignore it, and to go to the doctor, get diagnosed, to get the surgery, and then perhaps modify what you eat or your stress levels to not, to help you not build up more plaque in your arteries. So if you have something wrong with your brain, or if an addiction is taken over and now you have imbalances in your brain, you can't pray that out. But you can't pray that out. You can pray for wisdom and for the church community to guide you and help you as you seek with wisdom the proper treatment and the ability to overcome with the proper treatment some of these things that are wrong.
And that's how I did. I mean, it was a balance between my God life and my relationship with Him. But I also worked very closely with my primary caregiver, my therapist. I took the right medications. I still prayed to God, and I believe that He was the one who directed and led me. So, Deborah, that's exactly right. You have to have the balance of both.
And do you see how really it depends very much on our value system as a counselor too, of how we view mental illness?
Yes.
Right? And so I think that this is a really important point, and one of the ones I really just wanted to bring out was because even when we look at the research and we say, whenever someone has a mental illness, they always have better treatment outcomes, hands down, always better treatment outcomes when they have a strong support system. We know that, okay? That being said, oftentimes folks will find their social support system not only in their family, but in their church community, right? And in their own value system as it relates to their religion. But what we have found is that folks who have a very strong religious, not so much spiritual, but religious background, where they see God as very authoritative, oftentimes will internalize that they are not good enough Christians, and that's why they're having a problem, okay? And whether you subscribe to that value system or not, certainly people are all over the board. But when that is the case, their spirituality and their religion no longer becomes a positive support system for them. It becomes a negative support system. And we find that people actually do worse when they have that view. That's really interesting, that just something that we need to be aware of. I saw in a couple papers where not that anyone really said this, but it just got me thinking that we're not shying away from having the conversation about religion and spirituality. We need to jump into that conversation and understand how that impacts all of the system, all of the family, the conflict, the symptoms. We need to understand how the client sort of creates their worldview to incorporate their religion and their spirituality. That's
so
really,
I'm
really important.
Really ahead, but a question I have on that is, what is the appropriate time to do that? I guess I think about that often, because you want to be ethical, but so I guess I'm asking, what's the appropriate time to talk about that?
I start off my assessment with that.
You do?
Tell me, are you religious at all? Are you spiritual at all? And how do you think that's impacting? That's part of my just general assessment. I want to start there because it's going to help me understand where they're coming from. You know, I have met lots of people who, and I'm in a unique situation because I've always worked in public health. So I haven't had the freedom to say, well, you know what, I'm going to pray with my clients. Like, try that at a state agency. You won't be working there long, okay? You don't have the freedom to do that. But now in my private practice, there are two sides of the private practice that I'm in. And one, it advertises as Christian counseling. And then on the flip side of that, they have just their safe harbor counseling, but not necessarily Christian counseling. So when clients come in, the first question on their intake form is, do you want Christian counseling? And if they say yes, we say, what does that mean to you? Right? And I've had lots of clients say, well, you know, like I want to talk about scriptures and how they're impacting the way that I'm trying to change my behavior. Okay, great. Then we can do that. I've had a couple clients come in who say, well, I don't want to be here and getting counseling unless we start off and end with prayer. Okay. Do you want that prayer to come from me, or do you want that prayer to come from you? And we have a real clear conversation about what that is, right? Because I need to know what they're looking for and what they want. But I think, Deborah, what you were saying is so important, because some people come in and they think, and they do believe, they hold the value that if they could just pray more, or if they were just closer to God, or if they weren't sinning, or if they weren't, whatever it may be, that they could change their behavior. And sometimes, you know, whether we agree with that or not, you know, we have to help them understand that there is a brain thing going on, right? So there's both sides of that. I think we have to be really careful about that, and really exploring what the client, their worldview is, and how they conceptualize their symptoms and what they're experiencing.
Quick feedback. Would that be an example of the super ego dominating?
If they were really looking at this as like, they're not living up to expectations, this is what they have to be doing, they're not good enough, yeah, absolutely. Because we can think about, again, the super ego as part of this idea that, like, culture, we learn these value systems, right? And that's what the super ego is, like our morals, that is helping our moral compass, right? So yes, great tie together there, Deborah.
So would you say superegos is the things that turn people into cultists?
No, I wouldn't say that, Kevin, and this is why. It's because we really need to be careful. Remember, we're on a pendulum here, Okay, we're on a seesaw. Having just id wouldn't be good. Having just superego wouldn't be good. But we need to have both, right? It's not that one is good and one is bad. And I think that that's oftentimes what we think about. And again, this sort of goes to our Christian values too. Like, can we just say, like, God created us to be interactive sexual beings? Yes? I mean, can we agree with this? Yeah?
True.
Yeah.
Yes, it's true.
So I mean, and again, that's my value system. Maybe not everybody holds that, but we're interactive beings. And so this idea that like the id is all about sexual drives and all of that, right? And then we say that's bad. Well, no, it's not bad. God created us that way. Now, is it bad if we allow our impulses to dictate our behavior outside of the super ego and the culture and the value system and beliefs that we have? Well, yeah, we can get ourselves in a lot of trouble, right? So neither one is good or bad. They regulate each other. Yeah?
Some people kind of think of the id and the superego as kind of like the devil and the angel on your shoulder, for the most part.
Yeah.
Though the id isn't necessarily evil.
Think of it that way, but also remember that if you had no devil on your shoulder then, if you make that the id, we all wouldn't be here.
Yep. Because the ego is...
Then we'd be Jesus.
Yeah.
I know, right? Like, we wouldn't. I mean, we have to... Survival instincts aren't bad.
Yeah. There's a song, I can't remember the name of it, but it's like, if you want to get to heaven, you got to raise a little hell.
Amen to that. I hope it's true. Did I say that? Oh, man, it's being recorded. Dang it. No, just joking. Okay, so all right, I do want to move forward, but I want to just put out there too a great book that you all should read in your spare time. Okay, because I know you have a lot of that. It's called "The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down." Has anyone ever read that before? By Anne Fadiman. The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down. So when we're talking about religious and our spiritual selves impacting counseling and negotiating between that whole idea of like, is mental health spiritually based or sin based, or is it not, or all of that. It's not just in Christian religion that we deal with this, so let's not be sort of egocentric in that. Let's remember that this is across the board. And The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down is about a Hmong child who has seizures. And in her culture, they believe that that's actually a good thing because the spirit is overtaking her. Where Western medicine would say, no, she has epilepsy and she's having a seizure. And so the whole book is about these two cultures being able to come together, whereas first they were fighting each other and Western culture was like, medicate that, okay? And her culture was saying, no, she has a gift. And in the process, she was dying. Like, she was literally getting brain damage from the seizures that she was having. And so it wasn't until a physician and a social worker were able to come together and say, hey, you know what? It doesn't have to be all Western medicine, and it doesn't have to be all spiritual shamans in this situation. We can come together to treat this family and this whole community. It is a fantastic book that talks just about that, about how we can do that. So in your spare time, put it on the list for later, right next to Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, right? This is the part of the evening when we give you your book list for 5 years from now, okay? Okay, all right, so moving along from this, I just want to have a brief conversation about power differential, okay? We all know that when we're a therapist, there's a power differential between the client and the therapist. Yes, can we all agree to that? It does not matter how person-centered you are. and how you set yourself up to not be an expert and to be on the journey with the client and meeting them where they are, there is a natural power differential. They are coming to you because you're a counselor and you are trained to help them. And that automatically sets up the power differential that you know something they don't know and that you are an expert, even when you're not being an expert. Okay? So we have to be very, very careful with that as counselors. And so many of you said that, you know, if you had a value that was different than your client, that you would consider that it would be just fine to agree to disagree. And now on an internal level, I think that that is very true. Okay, because we can agree to disagree. I don't have to agree with your value systems to be able to help you explore your values, explore your behavior, and make the changes that you want to make. But I just want to make it very clear is that it's not a situation where I say to you, hey, Kevin, I don't agree with you. But that's okay. We can agree to disagree. Because the power differential then says, I'm the expert, and you're not, but we can disagree. What's going to happen is the client's going to then feel as if because maybe they're not in a place that they can agree to disagree. Then they're going to think something is wrong with them, that they don't agree with you because you're the expert. Do you see that? Mm-hmm. And then we have actually harmed the client and the process. So if internally we can say, yeah, like I totally don't agree with that, but never uttered from my mouth will I ever say that to you. Okay? That's really a really important point. I think I mentioned last week that I worked a lot with folks who are swingers, and I didn't ever have to tell them that that wasn't my lifestyle. I didn't ever have to tell them that I disagreed with that. Like, I just kept that part to myself, and I was a Christian who was counseling. You better believe I was praying for my clients. I wasn't praying for them in session with them there. But as I'm driving to work, I'm praying for them, right? And I don't agree, but that's okay. I don't have to agree. I can still work with them. When they come in and they say, well, my relationship is suffering, you know, my internal dialogue might be very different because I might think, well, your behavior could have something to do with that. But when I'm talking with the client, we're talking about trust issues and what that looks like inside of their belief system, right? That was a hard one, people. That was a hard one. But still, it is not my job to be their moral compass. I'm not their substitute superego. Okay? Now, I can pray that God brings someone into their life who can be that. But as soon as I have my license on the wall, it is not me.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Okay, so say you're working with somebody that is in a lifestyle like that, and they're constantly dealing with lots of drama, lots of pain, lots of breakups. They can't achieve that intimacy.
Yeah.
And then say that there's, you know, I already know they're out there, peer-reviewed, studied journals, scientific evidence, you know, data, that certain types, you know, like say one of their goals is to achieve a certain kind of intimacy, but this peer-reviewed journal shows that those types of relationships don't usually get that. Is it okay to share data? Like, well, you know, you're wanting this goal, but the lifestyle you have is, you know, it makes it a little bit harder to achieve that goal because this study shows this. So you're not bringing anything spiritual or saying the behavior is wrong. You're just saying that, well, that choice makes it a little more difficult to achieve based on this study.
So what I would say to that is that you do need to be careful about who's doing the study, right? And that it's a valid research study. But yes, I would say that let's say someone comes in and they've had a situation where there's been some marital infidelity, and they're talking about how they can't trust their partner, right? And their partner is saying, well, I don't know why you can't trust me. I'm not going to stop having this extramarital affair, but you should still trust me. I don't understand, right? Well, then, yeah, I might present to them that most of the research shows that one of the number one things that people experience in their relationships when there's been some sort of infidelity is the breach in the trust, right? That's not a judgment statement at all about whether or not they should change their behavior, but it is the research that this symptom could be directly related to their situation. Does that help?
Dr. Max, I always had I know they was talking about us being counseled by someone. I've been a counselor a long time, but I always hated it when I heard, say like if Johnson & Johnson wrote this big old paper about alcoholism, drug addiction, then you look on there and none of them has ever experienced the actual thing. And yet they determined this like they've been smoking, they've been doing this, and they've been doing that, and they're only talking to people who probably, most of them was a little bit of burned up in the head anyway.
Kevin, I love you. Yeah, okay, so I gotcha, and here's my response to that. If I have to experience everything that my patients have been through, forget it, I'm going to flip burgers at McDonald's, okay? Mm-hmm. So there is something to be said for research knowledge and empathy and how far that can go, because that, I can understand that in substance abuse.
Yeah, that's what I'm specifically thinking of right there. Yeah.
At some level, I can understand what you're saying, because there's an addiction piece of that, but on the other hand, like, I don't think that my therapist has to have shot up with heroin to be able to help me.
Well, no.
Well, so there's lines. You have to be careful there, because I do think that you can be very effective having not experienced what your client has experienced. Do I think that our experiences can help us be a better counselor? Sure. But to go the next jump could be a leap. That's
probably why group therapy helps, actually.
Yeah.
It does.
Because there's other people who have been there and done that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's a great point, Matthew.
Yep.
All right. So look, we could talk about this the whole time. We got to stop. It's so much fun though, isn't it? Okay. Stop. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about the weekly assignment later. But what I wanted to pull up is my other PowerPoint. Oh, there it is.
Excuse me.
All right. So moving along, you all hopefully got to watch my flailing hands video. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit more, because I really focused in on psychoanalytic, because if you get those principles, then all the other ones will fall into place. Okay, so that's really the foundation. Before I go forward, was there any questions that anybody had? Anything that they were like, wow, no, I don't get it?
Oh, well, Dr. Maxwell, chapter 3 was kind of interesting because it talked about multicultural, and that some people from different cultures have a certain type of behavior, but it might not be, you might not be able to get out of the DSM-5.
Mm-hmm.
And that we have to recognize that some things in different cultures are not, like you gave us the example about the book, The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down, are not looked at as abnormal in a certain community or culture.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it happens all the time. So I'll give you an example. When I was doing a research study in Baltimore City, working with folks who had substance abuse issues, had HIV, and were struggling with major depression. Okay, we had all of these measures that we used to decide whether or not someone met the criteria to be a participant in the study. We had one lady come in talking about spirituality, And she said she met all the criteria, but she was going to get thrown out because they couldn't decide if she had psychotic issues or had psychotic features, which was an exclusion for the study, because she said that she would pray that the devil wouldn't overtake her in certain situations, and her behavior, like she would pray because she was afraid that the spirits were, really fighting against her, right? And so, bless his little heart, the psychiatrist that was working on this, was the primary researcher, was a Messianic Jew. So when he heard this, he was like, she's got psychotic features. We need to medicate her. And I was thinking, whoa, what are you talking about? And she was like, no, she's like, I just have to pray because the devil's really coming against me. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you mean by that, right? And he was just so concerned that she was having psychotic features. Now, she's a born-again Christian, and she believed that the devil was attacking her and was praying about that. And so, to me, that didn't seem unreasonable on the scale of abnormality. It didn't. That's not to say I have had clients who have told me, I'm in the middle of session and they say, it's really hard to focus on what you're saying, Dr. Maxfield. And I'm like, why? And they're like, well, did you see that little red devil run under your desk?
Yeah.
No, I did not. And they're like, yeah, like 3 of them, and they're playing under your desk. Like, okay, so like that steps outside of normality. So so there's a fine line there, and culture really does play a huge part in that. Yeah, when we start talking about spiritual warfare, people start freaking out in psychology.
Ephesians.
That might not be for me. I have real high tolerance for that.
Yeah, they might think it's delusions or hallucinations.
Right.
Now, which counselor would that be? Would that be the Christian counselor or the counselor that's a Christian?
Most likely the latter.
What was that, Matt?
I was saying that it would most likely be the latter.
Yeah.
A counselor that's a Christian.
Christian.
Yeah.
So, because when he got,
I just want to touch base. You make a good point, Kevin. Is that here's the thing: is that a Christian counselor uses Christian counseling theory that may or may not be aligned with psychology, secular psychology. Okay. And I think somebody here said it the best: is that they really do focus on spiritual health, and they have theory surrounding that. That is not what we teach you at MACU, okay? We teach you tried and true, tested, evidence-based practice in psychology, and then we are here to mentor you in your Christian walk, okay? Hopefully that's your experience. If it hasn't, please call me. But that is what we want to do, is we want you to have your own spiritual growth as you're in this program, and foster that growth, but teach you sound psychological theory. I saw someone raise their hand. Yes.
I have an example of Dr. Maxfield. When I was a drill sergeant for about 3 years, and we had a soldier that had stopped taking his medicine. He was schizophrenic. Well, nobody knew until we got ready to go to the range. And that evening, his battle buddy came to me and said, hey, drill sergeant, my battle buddy keeps telling me that he's seeing blue babies in the bag. And at that time, it was a program on, but he was talking really weird. Nothing was connecting. And now, of course, I didn't know anything about psychology, but I knew people who don't normally act like that. So I said, bring him up here. And we took his weapon and we locked it up. Usually the soldiers keep their weapons overnight because it's an accountability type thing. They have to learn how to keep their equipment. And so the next morning when the senior drill sergeant came in, I told her that, that soldier was talking irrational. And they did end up sending him to Red River. But on the other side of that, if someone in my family said, the devil's really after me, we don't think of it as the actual devil, but all of these circumstances are happening all of a sudden. And so we would say, no, the devil's really after me, we have to pray. And that's just kind of the way we think about it. Probably not the actual real devil, but the spirit. That spirit of those things that are going on and they're happening one after another after another. And so we said we need to pray on that to keep him away. So there's two different schools of thought there, okay? One is like an irrational behavior, and if you weren't part of that culture, that would seem like an irrational thought as well if you were just saying the devil's after.
Right.
Dr. Max.
I think one of the things that you bring up that's so important is that just imagine being a client wanting to incorporate your spirituality into your counseling process and people backing away from that because they're afraid they're going to be labeled psychotic. Right? So we need to be very careful about that and make sure that we are addressing this stuff, because if we don't, then we are missing out on a really important piece, albeit maybe one of the most important pieces of someone's life, and we're ignoring that. All right, I hate to say this, but I feel like there might be a little bit of avoidance to start talking about Freud. Y'all keep coming back to this. Yeah, are you with me? Come on.
Let's go ahead and dive into it.
Okay, so listen, we're gonna just switch gears here because we could talk all night about this. But let's just talk. So, were there any questions about psychoanalytic theory?
None.
None at all, right? You've got it all.
Finally understood it.
Awesome. Okay, so let me ask you a question. Tell me what the 3 primary goals of psychoanalytic therapy are.
Bring the unconscious to the conscious.
Ding, ding, ding. She gets a star. What's another one?
I wrote them down, but I forgot my notes.
What was the question again? Sorry.
3 goals of psychoanalytic therapy.
I have. Oh, go ahead.
To strengthen the ego.
Strengthening what?
The ego,
Why would you want to do that?
because it's the mediator between
That's right.
super ego.
Yes.
And you need it to be stronger so that you can better.
So you can better balance your desires and your morals.
Regulate your
Control your behavior and your consciousness.
Okay, so here's the scenario. A woman comes in and she is in an abusive relationship and her partner is literally beating the crap out of her every week. He violates her sexually and physically on a regular basis. She comes in and says, I can't leave because I made an oath that I would stay married to this person. So I can't do that. I have to stay in this marriage. I have to do this. I have to, even though all of these things are going on. What part of her personality is dominant?
Super ego.
Super ego.
There you have it. Good. Okay, I think you guys got it. What's the third one, people? We've got that we strengthen the ego, we bring the conscious into the unconscious. What's the last one? Oh.
To determine the root cause of problems.
Okay, we can slide that right underneath of the idea that we're going to bring the unconscious into consciousness. What else?
Does it have to do with defense mechanisms?
We can slide that right underneath of which one? Strengthening the ego, right?
Yeah.
Good goal. What else? We want people to have a corrective emotional experience. Corrective emotional experience. Those are the 3 things. We're going to strengthen the ego. We're going to bring the unconscious into the consciousness so that we have more control over our behavior and our choices. And our goal, and this one speaks directly to that whole idea of transference, is that if they are transferring onto us characteristics of their early attachment, then we can have in our little microcosm of therapy a corrective emotional experience. Well, we can't, the client can.
In other words,
Or not. What was that?
So basically correcting problem behavior.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. There you have it. There
I almost thought that was kind of related to the ego thing, but that's something different.
Yeah. Yep. Although strengthening the ego is going to help with that, right?
Yep.
So, okay. All right. So what I wanted to do is really quickly, in the PowerPoint, in the video, I showed you this nice chart, right, of Erikson. Not going to really go into that, but this is ego psychology, which is Erikson, right? And I wanted to just,
Could you?
Yep. Go ahead, Kevin.
Could you put that back up there? Because I couldn't see you any of your other ones. So I was screen share. Well, there we go. Let me take a screen picture.
Okay, so let me just
Thank you.
this. I went back in once I realized that you all didn't see my PowerPoint. Attach this entire PowerPoint to that same message in the news section. So now you can download the PowerPoint. Okay, so you have all these PowerPoints in the classroom. Okay. All right, so I just wanted to talk a little tiny bit about how this really sort of falls under Erikson's ego psychology, but there's an important point here is that in ego psychology, we give just a little more credence to the importance of the working alliance. Okay, so whereas we still want to keep somewhat of a therapeutic distance, we can show a little bit more empathy and a little bit more sincerity and authenticity in our relationship. And Erikson would say that's not going to really impact your ability to create a transference reaction. Okay, so he allowed for a little bit more with that. Now we still have to be aware of transference and countertransference. But here's the piece I wanted to just add so that everyone is aware, is that when we're talking about strengthening the ego, it's really about two different things. One is ego sustaining techniques, right? Things that are going to keep the ego functioning where it's at, that are therapeutic and helpful, right? And those include ego sustaining techniques. They include focusing on insight into motivations and behaviors. Basically what you're doing is you are establishing that working alliance, you're exploring situations, you're allowing clients to sort of ventilate, talk. Remember we talked about that term that you should never use, verbally vomit? You are allowing the client to verbally vomit on you and tell you all about their problems and what's going on with them, okay? And you are allowing that to happen in therapy. That's ego sustaining, okay? So what we also want to do is ego modification, how we make it stronger. We make it stronger by allowing the person to ventilate and talk about their past situations and pulling the thread through to how that past situation is impacting the present and the here and now. That's how we modify ego. A little bit like that whole unconscious, conscious thing where we're pulling the unconscious into the consciousness. That's what we're kind of doing, is we're taking these past situations. Oh, you know, all this is because this happened to me when I was little and all these things happen. Ooh, and how is that impacting your relationship with your boss? How is that impacting your relationship with your partner? How is that impact? You're pulling those situations. How is that impacting our ability to establish a therapeutic relationship? And you're pulling it into the present. That's where the ego modification piece happens. Does that make sense? Okay, so one could say that when we start providing insight into how the past is connected to the future that's when we're really starting to strengthen that ego. Yeah? Okay. So that's really, I wanted to make sure that that piece was sort of added to what we talked about in that PowerPoint or the video lecture, because that piece is really important. Okay. Oh, never wants to. So there's a whole thing on limitations. The limitations across the board are what we already talked about in that video, but it's time consuming. It's vague. Okay, so I can sit down in a classroom and see how many times a kid in a classroom jumped out of their chair and interrupted the teacher and ran around the room and hit little Johnny upside the head, right? And then I can do an intervention and give them some positive reinforcement, and then I can measure again how many times they hit Johnny upside the head, ran around the classroom, and interrupted, right? But it's really hard for me as a therapist to be like, oh, yeah, 3 times during session, he projected onto me, we had a transference reaction. How are you gonna measure that? It's really hard to do, right? These concepts are very vague, so it's very hard to say, oh, look at this. That was a defense mechanism. I just saw him use that or her use that, and now I can see that it's changed, right? Very hard to see that. Now, symptoms will get better, so we can measure that, but the concepts are very vague and they're hard to measure. So that could be part of the reason why it's really hard in the research to find things that make you go, oh yeah, this works great, right? Because how are you gonna measure it? We are a society and a profession in science, we really like to be able to measure things. So if you can't measure it, then it probably didn't happen. And so this does not lend itself to that very well, okay? Yeah. It's mostly deficit oriented, right? We are looking at what the problems are and we are wholeheartedly focusing in on that. And not only that, is that, remember, in true psychoanalytic, it's really not looking so much at the environment at all. I am interested in what's going on in your head, not so much about any environmental stimuli, okay? Now, Erickson opened that up just slightly to say, you know, your environment does impact how you develop. And Adler made it even broader and said that your social situation definitely impacts how you develop, but it's still very much an internal change mechanism. Okay. Not really respecting a lot of human diversity here. Let's all remember that all of Freud's research was on who? Anyone?
That was her name.
It was his daughter. His daughter?
Freud did all of his research on upper class, usually white women who he could have sex with afterwards. Okay? So, I mean, that's just the honest truth, is that he didn't do a lot with any diverse populations at all. It was all upper class folks who could afford to pay him to do therapy 5 days a week for 2 years straight. Okay? How many of you would be able to afford to have therapy 5 days a week for 2 hours a day for the next 2 years?
No, I'd just be crazy.
For school.
Right? No, no one can do that. And insurance companies, if you were to say that that's what you're going to do, would laugh at you. Be like, yeah.
Only a veteran could get it like that.
If at all.
No, like, it's just not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. Interventions are really open-ended. Like, again, when do you measure that you've had an adequate transference reaction? Maybe when their symptoms go away? I don't know. Right? It's hard to tell when you're done. Okay, so let me. Okay, so Corey doesn't talk a lot about object relations in the textbook, and so you can feel free to read through some of this PowerPoint. I know we have a lot of time left, but I really wanted to talk a little bit about Adler. So there's some stuff in this PowerPoint on object relations. What I will say is that object relations basically says that we use these different concepts here. We use these, and we are experiencing our environment and our relationships with other people in ways that we're sort of like we're creating patterns, and that's how we're experiencing our relationships. So have you ever met somebody and you were like, whoa, I feel like I've met their twin before, right? Mm-hmm. And you're like, wow, is this like their doppelganger or something? Like, I've literally met this person before, okay? And the reason that happens is that oftentimes in our brains, we will say, wow, like this person, there's something about their behavior and their characteristics that are triggering us, that we are reacting to what would be considered in object relations a representation of someone else, okay? I like to say this. Sometimes, every once in a while, I'll have a client will come in and they're like the cutest little grandmother, and they come in for therapy, right? So I already start reacting. This could be a little bit of a countertransference, right? Is I already start reacting to them as if they are like the bacon cookies, adorable, loving grandmother, yeah? Because there's something about maybe the way they talk, the way they look, the way they behave, that it's triggering a representation in me of what my grandmother was, right? So now I'm no longer reacting to them as an individual whole person. I'm reacting to the representation of who I think they are.
Bit of stereotyping.
Yes, can be that. I think it goes a little bit beyond that as well. But yeah, there's something that we're reacting to about them that is reminding us of a situation past or someone else we have met, right? None of you have ever done that. Have you ever reacted to someone, maybe even a partner, maybe not based on what they did or how they said something, but that it triggered in you a memory of something else that has happened to you, right? Yeah. Okay. So that is really like down and dirty. This is what we're trying to work on in object relations, is that we will be able to see other objects, which could be people, ourselves. We are trying to see other people as whole, unique objects, as opposed to some representation of someone else that we've experienced in our life. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. The other piece of this is introjection. This is really important because have you ever been in a situation where you've been around a bunch of people and all of a sudden you start taking in characteristics of the people that you're around? One might call it social learning theory. Yeah? You with me?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So we went down south. We went to Savannah, Georgia. And I'm telling you, within 5 minutes, my husband was speaking with a Southern drawl. Okay?
Y'all.
It was
y'all.
yeah, he's like, how y'all doing? And I was like, what is that? Like, we're from the north, people. Like, I don't know what you're doing there with that little accent going on. But he grew up in Virginia, which for those of you out in Oklahoma, we consider the South. It's totally not, but whatever. He grew up there, and so now he would. I mean, as soon as he goes across the border and he starts talking with a Southern drawl, and you just go, "What are you? Like, who are you?" It is the cutest thing ever, right? But that's really introjection. He's around people, and he immediately takes on that characteristic, and that's the same thing that happens with psychological characteristics too. I know none of you have ever done this before, but if you're around some folks who are very negative, I know you stand your ground. You don't ever slide into the negativity path, right?
I worked with an individual once who, bless her heart, she had a lot to complain about. She had 2 children who have their own mental illnesses and bad marriage, blah, blah, blah. But she worked with me every day and I love her to death, but she complained more than anybody I know. All of a sudden, I'm complaining about everything.
Yeah, right?
My husband is like, what is your problem? And I'm like complaining about everything.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
We take on the characteristics of other people around us, okay?
Yeah.
Introjection. All right. This gets our goal, again, Corey outlined some of this, but our goal is that we wouldn't see people as part objects. We wouldn't focus in on just one characteristic of the person, but we'd see them as the whole person that they are. Yikes. That's hard sometimes, right? So you just have to ask somebody, have you ever, maybe when you were dating or in a relationship, you first got to know somebody, you probably honed in on one characteristic, right? Come on, we all do it. Like, oh, he is so thoughtful. So thoughtful, right? Oh, every situation, so thoughtful. We are seeing that person as a part object. And then, of course, you get to know them better, right? And then, 3 weeks later, right? But we hone in on one part of a person instead of seeing them for the good, the bad, and everything in between, the whole object, okay? So that's really what happens when we focus on one thing. And then sometimes when we get frustrated, we end up seeing people as all good or all bad. We no longer have the ability to see both the good and bad things that might be all-encompassing in that person. I like to think about that in grief therapy. We do this. We always know that people are getting better and moving through their grief process when they can start seeing the person who died as the whole person, the whole object that they are. Because what we tend to do when someone dies is we tend to make them a saint. And we only remember the good things because it feels very bad to be angry with someone who died, right? But so here's the reality of that, is that nobody is all good, okay? Well, I mean, no, just joking. No, nobody is all good, okay? And so sometimes when people die, like I'll work with folks who they've lost a parent and that parent had been sexually abusing them when they were a child. And then they have some complicated grief because now they're adult and their parent had died. And so it feels bad to be angry, but inside they're like, yeah, I am so glad this person died. Like now it's over for real. And so that disconnect and that kind of polar opposite is what causes a lot of the distress. And so they will come in and they only can talk good things about this person, even though there's this whole history that was really, really not good. And so when we work with them in grief therapy, when we can start seeing them being like, you know what, I miss them. I wish we had had a better relationship. But, quite frankly, they were a jerk and they were horrible to me. And they can start seeing the bad and the good again. We know that they're sort of integrating and coming through the process.
Doesn't the opposite happen sometimes where you only see the bad?
It certainly can, Matt. In grief therapy, a lot of times that doesn't happen because we tend to, it's like a natural phenomenon. We tend to saint the person who died. But that's not to say, there's always, as we say in doctoral programs, there is always a purple ostrich somewhere. Always a purple ostrich somewhere.
I have a question. This is not about grief, but this is about something that might happen. I know this person in their childhood, but they maybe some type of abuse, maybe emotional abuse, and that person grew up, but they're always trying to please the person who emotionally abused them, and that person is always seen in a better light. Well, they did this for me, they did that for me, but really, you are really angry with that person. You won't be angry with them, but you're angry with the persons who are closest to you about something that happened to you. And every time you have exchange with that person, you're trying to give them your best, but when they won't accept you, that's how you're mad again. And whoever is closest to you.
Yeah.
So,
Oh my gosh. Oh, this is such a great example. Okay, what defense mechanisms did you just hear right then? Everyone, jump in. What did you hear?
It was
the same thing you were saying about your husband. You might have been upset with him or whatever, but you making dinner, have wine, you're doing the opposite of what you really feel.
Reaction formation.
yeah, reaction formation.
Reaction formation is that I'm going to act the opposite that's more socially acceptable, even though I'm experiencing the exact opposite emotion internally. And also, I heard a little bit of denial there. Right? I'm denying my negative emotions, that they did anything bad to me. Right? Maybe I might even repress a little bit. And why would someone do that? Pop quiz.
Defense mechanism.
And why would someone use a defense mechanism?
Because their ego is compromised.
Because their ego is compromised. Yes. Ding, ding, ding. Gold star. Yes. That's right, because their ego is not strong enough to mediate between their id and superego. So to release the tension, they use defense mechanisms. So what are we going to do about it?
We're going to strengthen it.
Therapy. Well, you better find a therapist who knows what to do. That's the funny thing, is that oftentimes you'll meet with clients and you'll be like, yeah, you should definitely find a therapist that knows what to do. And then you're like, wait, hold on, I am the therapist. Okay. Figure out what to do. Okay, so who wants to tell me what you want to do in that situation? What would be the goal of therapy?
To have that person who really realize that they are upset and to deal with why they're upset, and to move into a place where they can understand like what happened to them. It doesn't have to form their opinion of who they are now. I don't know. Okay,
now let's convert that, because that's all very good. Let's convert that into therapy or psychoanalytic terms. What are we doing?
We're bringing the unconscious to the conscious.
Yes. And what else are you doing?
Correction of emotional behavior. And I say that because I can understand what she's talking about, because that basically, I had that problem for a long time of physical abuse, not sexual. And it took me a long time to get that off of me, because I had to accept. I always said, well, yeah, he took care of me. My stepdad did. He taught me how to hunt, fish, and all these other type of things. But I never could understand why he treated me like that until I found out through his mother, my grandmother, that he was done the same way. So until I found out that my grandpa, who I never met, had treated him like that, I was holding it in straight against him. And then once I found out, I said, oh, no wonder he was acting like that. It just jumped off my shoulder. So,
yeah.
It's kind of strange, but that's what happened.
So what the thing is, though, is that when you can identify the defense mechanism that's being used, right? And then once you do that, then you know if a defense mechanism is being used, that the ego is not strong enough. So you're going to strengthen the ego, right? So just like you're saying, Kevin, that's exactly what happened with you, is that you saw where you were denying, you saw where maybe you're using reaction formation, and then you could backtrack and be like, okay, so now we've strengthened the ego, which of course we do by bringing insight into how the past has impacted the present. And not only did you include yourself in that, you included your family history. See that?
Yeah.
Oh, come on. I feel like there's some Freud lovers coming. You know it makes sense. Okay. All right. Okay. So, okay, I'm just going to look here for a second, see if there's anything else I really wanted to tell you about. Because we're almost out of time, I'm just going to go over one more thing with you, okay? And this is it, is individual psychology. This is Adler. So the deal with Adler is that he had, like, I don't even remember how many brothers and sisters. So he was super focused on the fact that we are social beings. And then it's not even so much our relationship with our parents, right? Our attachment, our primary attachment, but that our relationship with our siblings also very much impacts who we become and how we behave. Okay? So it's not just a one-way back and forth between our attachment. It's also all of the other people in our social surroundings that are impacting how we're developing. What was that?
Order of birth,
I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
where you are in the birth first.
Yes, birth order. That's exactly it. So, so one of the things about Adler is that he really did not like diagnosing. He didn't like to make a diagnosis. Instead, he said that we all seek to be competent. We all seek mastery in situations, okay? And so what we need to remember is that when people are coming in because they are having some sort of distress, that our goal is to encourage them and help them move towards mastery, or the term that he used was superiority, okay? So people's distress is coming out of a feeling of inferiority in any given situation, okay? Now, think about that for a minute. If you feel inferior and like you are not having a worth, or you cannot meet the task that you are attempting to do, right? You feel inferior. But if you can master the task, and you feel, and he used not mastery, which is an object relations term, but he said that we are all trying to move towards superiority or mastery. Does that make sense? Newsflash, none of you would be in this classroom right now if there wasn't something in you that said, I want to move towards my goal in superiority. I am here. I want to be here. And that motivates us to move towards it. Yes?
Yep.
Okay. So, so then let me just tell you, you can look again, the goal of therapy from an Adlerian perspective is to encourage the client to move towards superiority. Okay? They're coming into therapy, so why are they having some sort of symptom or pathology? Because they're feeling inferior. Okay? Make sense? Yes, you're with me. All right, here's going to be my little synopsis, because this is just fun, and I want you guys to remember. Here's something interesting. Adler said that birth order was really very important, okay? Like we talked about just a moment ago. There's not a lot of research to support birth order so much right now. That is not to say that it's not important to consider, but I think that there's been, because of the changing dynamic of our family, our nuclear family, some of this is probably thrown off at some point, right? Bless you. So I would say that this is very interesting and somewhat comical at times. And it would be interesting to update Adler's position on family positions to see what that kind of looks like. But for what it's worth, the only child tends to be, they're the miracle baby, right? They're the only one. They get devotion of both of their parents. And they get 200% of everyone's attention, okay? Which results in some behavioral characteristics, like they like to be the center of attention. How many of you don't like being the center of attention? Okay, some of you introverts just said no. Okay, but in general, if someone wants to shower on you, and you're the only person to get all of those benefits, that's what happens with the only child, okay? Sometimes they have difficulty sharing with peers and siblings if they come along later. That they also prefer to be with adults and use adult language. Okay, so I don't know if you've ever seen an only child. Do we have any only children here? No
Mary's
only?
the only child.
Yeah, I am.
You are, okay. So and this may ring true for you or it may not.
Well, I was going to add something to that. My mom got a divorce from her first husband, but she raised me underneath somebody else who didn't have any children. So I could make some adjustments to that, but it was basically the same thing.
Yeah.
I retained what both of them taught me.
Yeah.
You know, in
I married
back in those days, we was taught children supposed to be seen and not heard. I don't know preferred adult company. We weren't allowed to do stuff like that. Not in the 60s.
Yeah.
I want to add, my husband told me once, because I am a true middle child, one right in the middle of two siblings, and he told me when I asked him about being an only child, because you hear all these horror stories about only children being spoiled and obnoxious. He said it made him feel more introverted. Like he made up his own friends. He played with imaginary friends. His parents were at work all the time. He feels like it held him back. It was attention and spoiling. He was left alone a lot. And he became very, very independent because of it.
Yeah. And maybe even, did he ever prefer adult interaction?
Yeah, he always has dealt better with adults than even his, I can't even tell you that he might have one good friend, his own age.
Yeah, yeah. And again, this is interesting because it doesn't fit for everyone, but I think elements do. And so it's interesting for us to keep in mind when we're conceptualizing clients, okay? Mm-hmm. So the oldest, the problem with the oldest, right, as if there's a problem, but they get dethroned by the next child, okay? So they have to learn to share. Oftentimes parents have really high expectations for the oldest child, and they often tend to have more responsibility, and they're expected to set the example. So I will say that they oftentimes become more authoritative, more strict. They feel that power is their right, and they can become helpful if encouraged. Like they can be very nurturing to all the ones below. And then some have said that they may turn to the father after birth of the next child, possibly because they feel dethroned, that mom's attention is going to the other child. So I'll say this, is that I am one of three. I have two older brothers. My oldest brother, to this day, if I make a mistake, he will take responsibility for it, which is nice for me. But no, just joking. but he always feels responsible for all of them. He has become very much he's the oldest. He always had the higher expectations for himself and would beat himself up if he didn't meet his expectations, not that anyone else would. The second child is really more of, and this should be peacemaker, but there's always someone ahead of them, okay? They are always the one who is trying to find their place in the world because there's someone ahead of them, there's someone below them, and so they are struggling to kind of find their place. So sometimes they become more competitive, want to overtake the older child, and may become more rebellious or try to outdo everyone. And competition often occurs. Do we have any second children? Yeah? Does that ring true for anyone? Maybe a little bit? All right, well, so I'll tell you, my second brother, unfortunately, happens to be taller than my oldest brother, which has continuously been a problem in our family, that the second is taller than the first. And so they're continuously competing because of that, okay?
I can relate.
So much so, did you say you can relate, Matt?
Yeah.
Yeah, so much so that when my oldest brother, went into the Navy SEALs, right? My second brother said, well, forget you, and became a DC police officer because they were federal. Okay? Right? So they're continuously competing with each other on pretty much everything, right? Now, this situation could be somewhat different only because they are like 7 years older than I am, 6 and 7 years older. So,
difference if it's same-sex siblings, like me and my sister, she's the oldest and I'm the middle. Our baby is my brother. Yeah. And so we treat kind of like you and your brothers, and you are the baby. Yeah. So do you think it's same-sex makes a difference in the rivalry there?
I do think so. I do think so, very much so. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. To just go down this chart, though, he always is feeling sandwiched. He was always the one who would be like, he would sit in his room and no one invited me to dinner. And he'd be like, well, did you come downstairs? No. Right? He always trying to find his place. Okay. So then comes the youngest, right? This is the one where everybody's their mother or father, and the older child is always trying to sort of educate them, or and the youngest child's never dethroned. And I can attest to that absolutely being the case, right? Youngest and only daughter. That is a magic combination right there. But it is so true. Do you have any others like that?
No, I'm actually the only child for like until I was 12, 13 years old. And then I found out I had two half brother and sister, and then I became the youngest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No transition there. Right? Yeah. So here's the thing about the youngest, right? We always want to be bigger than all the others, and may have huge plans that never work out. But we always get to stay the baby and stay spoiled. Now, my brothers would tell you that I'm absolutely spoiled and always the favorite. I don't really see it that way, but okay, they can see it that way if they want to, no problem. But I will tell you that I've always had bigger plans, okay? So when the minute I graduated with my master's, I got an apartment within 6 hours and moved out. And my brothers continued to revolve around and move back in, move back out, move back in, move back out. Now I was off doing my own thing, right? So I was always competing with them to have bigger plans. That's probably the only reason I have a PhD, honestly. But that's okay, right? It's motivation, yeah? Okay. No, I'm just joking. Okay, so that's the youngest. And then twins, usually one is stronger and more active, right? And parents might see them as different ages, even though they're not. Are there any twins? No? So I have twins, and this is absolutely true. They're 11 years old right now, and my daughter, she was born 1 minute before her brother, and she will literally introduce herself and be like, hi, I'm Lily. I'm a minute older. That's the most important pieces for her to tell people, okay? So anyway, and she's definitely the stronger personality, and we joke around because she was a whole pound larger. She's been stealing from her brother even in the womb. She would fight him off, and she still, if I don't kill her, she's going to be president one day, for sure. But I'm not sure if she'll live that long. No, I'm just joking. But she has a very strong personality, and her twin brother is just like, whatever. That's fine. You can have it. Eat all my food. That umbilical cord, you can have it. It's fine. I don't care. He's so relaxed that you can't really actually get him upset. Okay? Okay. The ghost child is a child that's born after the death of another child. And so oftentimes parents can be very hyperprotective of that child. And so they can, at times, you see them rebel more because they, everyone is so protective and they feel like they can't live with outside of that shadow of the child that was lost. Okay? So this chart is kind of fun to just play around with, okay? And this is really Adler's contribution to psychoanalytic, really psychodynamic theories. Is this idea of inferiority and superiority. and encouraging people in this social connectedness that is not just attachment, but to your primary attachment, but your whole social situation. Any questions about that? I'm gonna stop sharing for a moment. Okay, so we are over our time. Okay, I know you all want a break, and you've got that other video. I'm gonna post this one as well. If you have any questions, can I encourage you to go into the virtual office on D2L and type those in. If you have a concept that's just not making sense for you, or you have any questions, could you just put that in there, and I will write a response so that everybody can see it, because chances are other people will have the same questions. Okay. As far as the weekly assignment this week, you have a template that you need to complete. Please hear me loud and clear. I revised said template to take out some of the repetitiveness. It was 32 pages long, people.
Oh my.
Yeah,
But
I
I
freaked me
got
out.
it down to 14 for you. And part of that was repetition. And if I were to just put the questions that you were going to answer, it wouldn't even be that long, okay? But the important thing is that I want you to look at that template and follow the questions. Like literally put the number that corresponds to the question and then write the answer. Because what we're looking at as motivation behind change, right? What motivates someone in the theory, in that particular theory, to change? Why do they want to change? So, like if we were to talk about Adler, people want to change. Why? Because they feel inferior. They want to achieve superiority. There you go. There's your motivation for change, right? In psychoanalytic, why do people want to change? Well, because they're unconscious. It's causing them to be reactive to their environment. Yeah? And we want to bring that into the consciousness so that they can make change. So just walk through each one of those questions. And if you have questions that come up, let me know, because I'm more than happy to help you out. I will say, let's call week 2's assignment a practice run. Does that help take the stress off a little bit?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Take it as a practice. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Did you say something? Okay. Just take it as a practice run. Get familiar with the template. Next week, we're going to spend some time talking about the case. We will analyze it together in class, so make sure you turn your assignment in on time on Monday night. And we'll talk more about the case, okay?
I have a question.
Dr. Maxfield, I'm sorry. We're
So we're to watch the video that you posted online and verbatim answer the question on the template?
So I would say that I tried very hard on the video to make sure that you had the basic concepts that you would need to fill out the template. Yes is the answer to that.
Okay.
Okay, does that help? And I actually posted the PowerPoint too, so you can actually pull it up and read it instead of in my flapping hand.
Be working at all with the CD that comes with the book?
Yeah, so you should read, you should watch, and you know what, I wanted to watch that tonight, but we had such a great conversation about spiritual values and things like that we didn't get to it. But maybe next week we'll plop down on some of that video, because I did want to watch that. You should watch the video that's corresponding with each theory. So this week you would watch the video on Adlerian and psychoanalytic therapy with Stan. Okay.
Sorry.
Yep, go ahead, Matt.
I had a question. I didn't get grades I didn't get my class participation graded. I didn't do the participation part in D2L, but you said we didn't have to do that if we do these lectures, right?
Yes. So let me just clarify on that. Last week when we first met, we looked at that PowerPoint I had. So take a look at that again, and I put on there exactly what you would be graded on. You're not getting graded on participation and attendance. There's no way for you to make that fair across the board. So although it might be in the grade book and you'll see, oh my goodness, I didn't grade a grade on that. When I calculate your final grades, none of that will be included. The only thing that's going to be included is your assignments, your quizzes, and your final project.
Okay.
Dr.
Okay.
Maxfield, you had mentioned last week about doing in advance the projects for a final project, like each week. I can't find the template for that. Is there a final project template, and it's posted under course documents?
Yeah. Or it might be in the final week of the class too. Every once in a while they put it there.
Okay. And then you said we just email that to you each week?
You can email me your case conceptualization if you would like to, and I would be happy to give you feedback so you know you're on track. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead, Lou.
On the final project,
Mm-hmm.
where are we getting that information from? Like, are we looking at the cases on the TV? Is that what we're doing?
So the final project has a case study that goes with it. I believe it's actually in the template, but I will double check it this week and make sure. Okay. So the case study will be in the template for you to analyze using the different theories.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Here's what I don't want to have happen, okay? I do not want you to be stressed out about your weekly assignment this week. I want you to pull up that template. I want you to give it your very best shot. I want you to look at that video again. If you have questions, look at the PowerPoint, look at the basic concepts, pull it together. I will give you feedback so that it all makes sense. Give it your best shot, okay? This is a learning process, so don't stress, all right? Okay, I don't think there's anything else I had to tell you.
Thank you.
Have a great week.
Thank you.
If you have questions, make sure you shoot me an email, shoot me a text, give me a call. Bye.
So,
Yep.
are we going to be watching parts of that case of scan video, or how's that work?
So you should have gotten the DVD with your stuff, so you can watch that. We are going to be doing it in class, but this is a new format with just doing the 1 hour lecture and then the hour and a half. And I really wanted to talk about APA and follow up with what I saw on the papers. So that's why.
I got the disc, so it's all good.
Yeah, and those aren't very long, so you can absolutely watch that. And then next week, if we have time, I'll circle back and we'll look at it.
Aye.
Okay?
Yep.
I just want to thank Deborah for giving us cute baby overload tonight.
I know, right?
It's so
cute.
That's a stress reliever right there.